Good morning, First Church. I was glad when they said unto me, "Let us go into the house of the Lord." For in God's house there are no strangers. Brothers and sisters are we. It is a special joy for me to be here with you, and I thank you for your very warm and gracious welcome, for the hospitality that you have extended to me, and for the many ways over the course of the past few hours that you have helped me to feel that I too am a part of First Church and no stranger in your midst. And I know that I can say the same thing for my colleagues, for Kathy and for V, that we feel very much welcomed here. We like to say in church world service that we're all part of the same family. And indeed, you have made us feel as though we are part of your family. Now, I want to say that there should be no prompting in this moment, so follow me. I want to especially express appreciation to Pat for being such a wonderful colleague and for inviting me to step into this pulpit. It is indeed a special joy for me, and I am glad to be able to extend a similar invitation to her, because we have, as Church World Service, been examining the possibilities for leadership for our organization moving forward, and we are in the process of electing a new board of directors. And so it is a joy for me to share with you that Pat has been nominated to be a member of the board of directors of Church World Service, and we hope that she will be elected in October, and she will commence her service for 3 years in January. Good. You did very well. I'm very pleased. Honestly, though, we're very, very excited about this opportunity to have her as one who lives in the midst of the local church and understands that context and can help to interpret that for the work of Church World Service and help us as we think about our vision and our mission as we move forward. But also, I think, as she represents perspectives that come from the West Coast of the United States, because it is a different perspective from other parts of the country, and so it is a unique opportunity, and we are indeed grateful. Let me also just pause to say a word about this red robe that I have on. When I was a young pastor getting started out, I discovered very early on that one does not always preach a great sermon every Sunday. And so what I discovered was that it was probably very wise to make sure that the congregation, that while they might be tempted to say, well, on this Sunday we didn't hear anything, they can never go out saying they didn't see anything. It's good to be with you, and it's good to have these moments to tarry just a little while, to reflect on what does it mean to find true reconciliation and justice in our lives. So I ask that you tarry with me for just a few moments as we reflect together. "38 years. 38. That's what she told me as we sat together in her living room. 38. For 38 years, her life had been confined to the space of the living room where we sat. Not because of a crime that she had committed, but because of the condition into which she was born. 38 years. of watching one generation of her life story die, and of wondering when a new one was born, whether it too would tell this same story of sitting in this same space. 38, she said, of waiting for her infirmity to be lifted, of praying that someone would finally say it was her turn to be free. When will my turn come? She said. What about me? She wasn't a Christian. I don't know that it really matters. The gospel story tells us of an invalid sitting outside the 5 porticos of Bethesda. This isn't a story that she would have been familiar with. It's not one that she would have drawn inspiration from. It's not one that would have given her a sense of hope and possibility about the future. But had I told her about the story of this one, waiting for a miracle to lift the infirmity that he had lived for 38 years, she would have told me that she could understand, that she could relate, because she knew the anguish of being passed by, of being cut in front of. "Excuse me," I said to the man who stepped in front of me as I stood in queue at the hotel counter. "Am I invisible?" He turned as if surprised by my presence. "I didn't see you. I'm sorry," he said. I repeated my question. "Am I invisible?" Annoyed by my refusal to let go of the question, he turned and walked to the end of the line. He didn't understand. I didn't intend to be rude. I didn't intend to offend his intelligence. I really wanted to know, did he not see me waiting there? Did I not matter to him? Was he so focused on his own needs in the moment that the circumstances of others just simply did not exist? Am I invisible? Bethesda was known as a healing pool. And according to the tradition, people gathered at Bethesda anticipating that an angel would occasionally appear and stick a finger in the water and stir the waters. And the belief was that the first person to enter the water would be healed. Now, friends, I wouldn't really fault you if you questioned whether or not such a pool actually ever existed. I wouldn't be surprised if you concluded that this was just another example of biblical fantasy. Honestly, that's what scholars thought. Until the 19th century, when archaeologists uncovered the remains fitting the description in John's Gospel. After all, literature is filled with all manner of fantastic things that are yet to be proven. So why would I be surprised if you doubted? Native American warriors of the Creek and other Indian nations sought out the natural warm springs of Pine Mountain, Georgia. How many people know where that is? They did it in the belief that they held special medicinal properties that helped with the healing of battle wounds and other injuries. Today, this area is more famously known as Warm Springs, Georgia. Am I right? And it's the place where, for 24 years, Franklin Delano Roosevelt retreated, hoping that an angel had stirred the waters so that he would be cured of the paralysis that took his legs from him. There exist places to which people make their way, they make their pilgrimage, believing that it will be the source of comfort, of healing, of wholeness in their lives. Maybe for some of you, this church might well be that place. And who am I to tell you that no such thing exists? Yes, the gospel tells the story of a man whose legs had failed him, and we were not given the details, but really does it matter? He likely was one of many, more than anyone probably could count. Bethesda was known not only as a place of grace, of healing, but it was also known as a place of mercy. It was a gathering place for the pathetic. Not the pathetic, provoking feelings of compassion and pity, but the pathetic that could only leave one feeling contemptibly inadequate. He likely was one of hundreds who gathered there, people considered by conventional society to be worthless, to be inferior, to be undeserving of respect. Well, the parable of the Good Samaritan recounts the story of someone who was beaten up, who was left for dead on the side of the road. Talk about being worthless, inferior, undeserving of respect. Did those who came upon him conclude that his situation was pathetic or pathetic? Is it our role to first determine whether this person was an offender or a victim as a precondition to helping? You know, infirmities, they unfold every day and everywhere. In church service, we talk about hunger, and we talk about poverty, and displacement, and disaster, and injustice, and indignity. These are all infirmities. And regardless of what one's conditionality might be, regardless of what one's infirmity might be, I think we would all agree that 38 years is a long time of being ignored and stepped over and walked around and forced to wait yet another day to possibly find relief. It's a long, long time. Admit it. When you're hurting, even one day can be a long time. As my car sped down the main street into the center of Monrovia, Liberia, there was a tall man who was hurriedly walking down the sidewalk, weaving in and out through the crowds. he was completely naked. The companion in my vehicle said, "Ignore him," saying, "He's mad. He's stupid. He doesn't exist." I could tell from the expression on this man's face that he was probably somehow mentally impaired and probably uneducated. But he did exist. And it was later that day that I sat with President Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia and listened as she lamented how climate change is deteriorating her government's ability to feed her nation. You know, when the man who had waited 38 years was seen carrying his own mat, some people were indignant that he was healed on the Sabbath. But we live in a world where no such thing is permitted on the pretext of beliefs and mores and rules that oftentimes make no sense. Others looked at this man incredulous, reminding us that we also live in a world where, juxtaposed, we believe no such thing is possible. When he looked up, and he saw a large crowd coming towards him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread to feed these people?" What do you do when you see the need? What do you do when you see the masses? What do you do when the masses are moving towards your direction? When you're overwhelmed with the circumstances of need? Do you send them away? Do you decide that the situation is hopeless? Do you ignore them, hoping that somehow if you just turn your eyes in the opposite direction that they will not see you or expect anything from you? This is not about guilt, because I believe that God derives no pleasure in our feelings of guilt. Jesus' question was a test, but it wasn't about guilt. There was a lesson to be learned, and it was that we are not powerless even in the face of the most daunting circumstances. Philip could not imagine purchasing or finding enough food to feed what biblical historians would later record as a crowd of 5,000. He couldn't imagine it. It's just impossible. He said, "There's no such thing." The test of faith, however, teaches us otherwise. And Jesus' answer to the question was, also, there is no such thing. Because he knew that Philip had the power to feed the masses. You know, people often ask me how it is that I'm able to stay with the mission of CWS. And I hear about all the different stories of the places that I've been, the people I've met, the situations that I've confronted, all the pain, the anguish, the sorrow, the enormous challenges that people face all over the world. They want to know how I can hear the heart-wrenching story of a Palestinian woman who has lived her entire life as a refugee. or stand to witness someone deranged, probably because he never had a chance from birth to consume a nutritious diet, or to sit with the president lamenting the demise of our people against overwhelming odds. People often ask me, and the answer is faith. Faith teaches that there is no such thing as the impossible, that there is always a way, that we just have to be willing to step into the situation to find the solution. Faith teaches us that solutions will never be found by going around it or ignoring it. No, the truth is that I'm not so strong that I can lift every impaired person onto my shoulders. That I am not so rich that I can say to the innkeeper, take care of this person for as long as it takes and I will pay the price. And I am certainly not so spiritually endowed that I can make the lame walk. But I have friends. And I know that together we can lift the heaviest burden. That together we can meet any cost. And that together we can make it possible that all of the troubles of this world can find their place in the pool of healing waters. Even if we have to do it one at a time. I'm sure that you've seen the face of gratitude. The face of someone who once thought that the world had essentially left him or her for dead, only to have someone come along, embrace them, and care for them regardless of the cost. Isn't it great? A little more than a week ago, I stood in a church filled with several hundred Haitian peasants. I stood because the spirit of their songs and their dances were simply too contagious for my spirit to sit down. So I stood and I swayed along with them as they sang and as they danced. And I wanted so much to walk down the aisle and dance with them. I joined in their singing, even though I didn't know the words. But the melody touched my soul. And I laughed with them as they told stories of how their lives had been changed, how they had been lifted, how they had been healed, how they had been given new possibilities. Because somebody saw them on the side of the road and picked them up and cared for their wounds. That somebody was willing to pay the price. That somebody was not deterred by what day of the week it was. They celebrated how their lives had been changed. Oh, and as they celebrated, I heard the echoes of, it's amazing how the Spirit works, but I heard the echoes of Mahalia Jackson singing, "How I Got Over." You know the words, how I got over? How I got over. My soul looks back and wonders how I got over. I made it. I made it, she said. My soul looks back and wonders how I got over. And when I think about the goodness of Jesus and all he's done for me, if it had not been for his mercy, God knows where I would be. He brought me through great trials in spite of the enemies. My soul looks back and wonders how I got over. She goes on to say, and since then I lost my mother. My heart was filled with grief. The pain kept on burning. I could not find relief. And then I asked the Lord to help me, and yes, He gave me peace. I made it. Look at me now. I'm still here. Yes, I made it. I came through the rough times. I should have lost my mind, she said, but yes, I made it. I made it. I made it over. I made it over. They tried to stop me, but I made it. They tried to block me, but I made it. They said it in His word that I can make it and I can take it. And I've never seen the righteous ones forsaken. How I made it over. I made it. I made it. Yes, people ask me if I get tired of this work, and I say, how can I get tired? Do you ever get tired, Pat? You can't get tired. I can't get tired, and I believe Pat can't get tired, and I believe you can't either. Because I cannot accept a world where people are not able to feed their families. I don't get tired because I cannot accept a world where children are prevented from reaching their potential. I don't get tired because I cannot accept that women are relegated to spend the rest of their lives early in the morning and late at night carrying containers of water every morning, every night, just to care for their loved ones. I cannot accept it. Do they get tired? Yeah, the other day someone questioned the plausibility of transforming, healing, and feeding the world's hungry for peace and justice, fairness, against the backdrop of rules and regulations and prohibitions and cultures and traditions and the seemingly impossible. He asked me whether Church World Service had bitten off more than it could chew. It's a funny thing to ask a hunger agency, you know. But I paused for a moment, and I looked the man in his eyes, and I said, there's no such thing. Amen.